Hello and welcome to the program. I am Mary Kano. In a fresh twist, the federal government has asked the Supreme Court to dismiss a suit filed by 3 states challenging the February 10 deadline set by the Central Bank of Nigeria to end the use of the old Naira notes. On Wednesday, the Supreme Court temporarily restrained the federal government from stopping the use of the old Naira notes from February 10, 2023. A 7-member panel of the Apex Court led by John Okoro made the ruling on Wednesday in an ex parte application brought by Kaduna, Kogi and Zamfara states. Meanwhile, hours after the Supreme Court restrained the CBN and the federal government from sticking to the February 10th deadline for people to swap their old Naira notes for the new ones, the federal government has approached the Apex Court asking it to dismiss the original suit challenging that deadline set by the CBN. In the preliminary objection filed on Wednesday through his lawyers, the Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, argued that the Supreme Court lacks the jurisdiction to entertain the matter. President Muhammadu Buhari had met with the CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele and Attorney General of the Federation at the Presidential Villa, Abuja, shortly after the Supreme Court ruling, but the outcome of the meeting is yet to be known. Despite the Supreme Court's interim injunction restraining the CBN from enforcing the deadline for phasing out the old notes, more commercial banks have showed their doors to customers, halting cash operations while putting out notices informing customers that the deadline still stands. The CBN too has not given any indication yet that it is going to comply with the ruling of the Supreme Court. There are unconfirmed reports that the Apex Bank may choose to ignore the Apex Court's ruling on the argument it was not a party to the case before the court. Now, to speak more about these developments, legal expert Tunde Falola joins me now. Thank you very much for joining me on the program. Now, there have been arguments in some quarters that the Supreme Court acted outside its jurisdiction in its ruling, which prompted the suit filed by the Attorney General. Do you agree with this? And also, what's your reaction to the judgment by the Supreme Court halting the February 10 deadline for the validity of the old Naira notes?
Thank you very much, and I appreciate you for having me around. Let me start by saying, even though as a lawyer, we are not expected, to discuss the issue that have been submitted, to courts, for adjudication. However, for the purpose of this program, I will, as much as possible, restrain myself because the matter is sub judice. Be that as it may, and going back to the question to ask, you pose the issue that whether the Supreme Court has jurisdiction or not, and that is the position of the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation. I want to disagree with the office of the Attorney General with due respect to his office. I want to disagree on the basis that, the Supreme Court, under the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as amended, particularly Section 233, has been vested with power to deal with, issues between states and the government of the Federation of Nigeria. And that, on that basis, was the reason why the government of Kaduna, Kogi, and Zamfara went to Supreme Court to challenge, the policy implementation of the federal government regarding the monetary policy. So to say the Supreme Court has no jurisdiction, to say the least, and with all due respect to the office of the Attorney General, is misconceived in law because states are involved. And the mere fact that not all other states of the Federation made parties in the suit, does not, invalidate the jurisdiction or the competence of the court to adjudicate on that matter. That was the first point. The second point is that the judgment of the Supreme Court, or the ruling, as it were, is being a final court, is binding on every authority throughout the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So to say that maybe it is the Central Bank of Nigeria was not made a party to the suit, doesn't render the suit incompetent and doesn't take away the jurisdiction from the court. Now, regarding the temporary ruling, the implication is that the government as well as its agency, which include the Central Bank of Nigeria, they are bound by that ruling until set aside. So they are bound to comply with that ruling. And that is why you can hear the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation this morning or yesterday has said the government is going to comply with that order. That's my position.
Can go on and on and on about this case, but you know, some have argued that the CBN is not party to the case before the Apex Court. Now, what do you make of the argument and that the ruling could not apply to the CBN?
Thank you very much. First and foremost, you have to, find out the status of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Even though the Central Bank of Nigeria is an entity, it's a legal entity that can sue and be sued. And that is why you have a plethora of cases where matters are involved, banks in another entity, they, took the Central Bank of Nigeria to court. However, in this instance matter, the Central Bank of Nigeria is an agency under the government of the Federation. So, and once the principal is joined as a party, it is not necessary, to join the agency as it were in this case. Secondly, misjoinder or non-joinder of party, is not a matter of jurisdiction. It doesn't render the court, the case incompetence. The mere fact that you do not join a particular party that ought to be joined ab initio, doesn't render the suit, incompetent. But the appropriate court the other can make is to ask, the party concerned to, join or on his own join the party that is, expected to be joined in the first instance. So the mere fact that this CBN was not made a party to that suit doesn't render the suit incompetent.
So far, the CBN has not given, any indication it plans to comply with the ruling of the Apex Court. Now, if that happens, what can the Supreme Court do?
Well, the Supreme Court, just like any other court, more so this is the Apex Court. They have that punitive power, on the prompt of any of the party before it. So if there is any, non-compliance by any agency of the government, I think the parties that went to court, they know what they should do before the court. And in any event, the Office of the Attorney General has given indication that the government is going to comply. So who is CBN to say they will not comply? Once the Attorney General has indicated that the government will comply, they dare not dare the Supreme Court.
All right, now let's move to something else. The 2023 general elections, the elections are fast approaching, and with all of this confusion and chaos caused by the redesigned currency and saying that, well, like I said, we are just a few weeks to the elections, somehow do you see any of these issues impacting the elections?
Thank you very much. And I think before the Supreme Court ruling, there was every indication that the nation is heading towards anarchy, lawlessness, as a result of the scarcity of of the Naira. But thank God that the Supreme Court has waded in and has temporarily stopped the implementation of the policy. If not, only God knows what will have been happening by now. You can see, recently we have cases of demonstration in some states of the Federation, Ogun State and one other state, that people took to streets to protest, the hardship they are passing through. In the history of this nation, I don't think this country has ever passed through this kind of, economic hardship orchestrated by this unpopular policy. It is expected that every government policy must have human face. But in this case, the reverse is the case. You can have money in the bank and you can't get it. And in some cases, you have money in the bank, you have to pay to get your money. So with the intervention of the Supreme Court now, I think peace and, the tension has started, are being calmed down. People are no longer agitated as it were before the Supreme Court ruling. If that has not taken place, I doubt whether that election will not be postponed. But with this recent development, I think there is no excuse for INEC not to go ahead with that, with the conduct of the election.
Well, INEC has said the elections will go on as scheduled, but there are allegations that commercial banks are holding these Naira notes. You know, bank officials have also been arrested after hidden bills of unopened new notes were discovered. Would you call this a sabotage to the federal government's efforts?
Well, I think the Central Bank of Nigeria, being the regulatory body over all banks and commercial houses in Nigeria, they should know what to do. They should put in more effort, at arresting this situation. There have been reports from the Central Bank of Nigeria that they have enough money in circulation. But the question is, where are this money? I can give an example. Yesterday, I went to one of my bankers, but I needed money. They said they don't have cash. How can a bank, a commercial bank, be telling its customer that they don't have cash? Where are the cash given to them by the Central Bank of Nigeria? I think they have to intensify this monitoring. Let that be task force, set up by the Central Bank of Nigeria, with the mandate to, pursue and arrest all these people that are sabotaging the effort of the government, aiming at, making the funds, the Naira available to the generality of the people. So they should intensify. Let them step up, their efforts, aim at, getting, across to those people who are sabotaging their effort. That is what they should do.
Well, all right now, Tunde Falola, legal expert, thank you for your insights and for joining me on the program.
You're welcome. Thank you.
But we'll take a break and be right back. To stay with us.